A couple of days ago, we spent about 30, almost 40 minutes talking about how Dennis Allen needed to be fired. Well, that's kind of starting in the middle because the guy that needs to go first is Mickey Loomis. And we all know it. No big secret. I'm Tim. Let's talk Saints. Now, before we get into Mickey, one little subject. It's kind of the starting point. We need to talk about it. And I want to do it very carefully because I don't want my words misconstrued. So I'm going to try to speak as carefully as I can on this subject. But it's about ownership and it's about Miss Gale. And I do not want to seem like in any way, shape, or form, because I am definitely not attacking her as a person. They think she's a great person. She's done an awful lot. City of New Orleans, state of Louisiana, the Gulf Coast in general, and I'm pretty sure other places around the country and the world that I don't even know about. Nice lady. I mean, she's kind of like the grandmother, the aunt we all want, unless you're the poor bastard trying to carjack her, because then she turns into a pit bull and apparently tore his ass up for being that stupid. But outside of that, I never nothing bad spoken about the woman, just a lot of good things. And anytime you've been able to hear her speak or talk, I like I'm saying, that's like that older take care of us relative we all want to have in our lives somewhere. That being said, she is the owner, and ultimately, she's the one that's got to do something to get this ball rolling to fix this mess we're finding ourselves in. What I feel like, um, all that being said, that we don't see the pit bull. I get the impression she's like the mom who doesn't spend a lot of time at home, things to do. She's busy woman. Um, Not really around enough to keep an eye on the kids because she's figuring they're old enough. They're teenagers, nearly adults. They can handle this. They don't necessarily need me as around as much right now. I trust them. And what she actually has is a couple of teenagers who like to throw wild and crazy parties and tear the house up when she's not there. And they keep getting away with it. No consequences. They keep doing it. And I feel like that's the Saints front office. And until mom comes home, disciplines at least one of them, if not all of them, it's going to keep happening. I don't know um, exactly her involvement in running the team. And I'm basing this off the impression. I think there's basically three types of NFL owners, and really in any type of enterprise or organization, three types of people at the top that run it. One is like a micromanager all up in there. And as far as NFL teams are concerned, probably not the way to go. We've seen a lot of that with some owners, and normally it doesn't work out real well. They tend to meddle and screw stuff up more than they fix it. The second type, and one I think Tom Benson was, I think he was a little bit of the first one for a little while, but he's a very smart man, ran a lot of businesses and understood, I think, what a good owner does in the NFL. I need a working knowledge of how all this happens within my organization and around the league collectively. So I can make sure I've got the right people in there that I'm able to hold them accountable and take corrective measures when needed. And they know that. So even if I'm not here 100% of the time, eyes on constantly, getting in their business, finding out what's going on, I know enough to know, especially when I look at the results that they hit the field. Remember, this is a man that one time called, I think it was 2004, 2005, team played like a bunch of high schoolers. And he wasn't afraid to get out in the media and, you know, call it like he saw it. But I also think he kind of backed off over the years and went, I have people I pay who are better at this than me. My job is to make sure they're doing their job, holding them accountable. Now, not saying Miss Gale doesn't do that, but I'm just kind of mighty afraid in one way, shape, or form. She's kind of the third category, which is that owner that's barely involved. And I don't mean it in a bad way, like it's neglect or they ignoring it or anything like that. It's just she's put her faith and trust in others to take care of this for her. And we've seen that style of ownership a lot over the years in the NFL, varying degrees of success. I can think of one widow who inherited her team. Uh, Georgia Frontiere with the Rams, fair to Midland success there, but I think for the most part, they went the way whoever she had running the team. So when she had good personnel there, everything was fine. When it wasn't, well, heads rolled. And I don't know if she was doing her. I do not commenting on it directly how it worked, whether this was coming from her or people she trusted who weren't vested like Mickey Loomis is in the team and not out there just to protect their job, but to go, no, that's got to go. That's got to go. That's got to go. I'm not sure what the dynamic is. And the only reason why I'm bringing all this up, because we're in the unfortunate set of circumstances right now until Ms. Gale turns into the pit bull that tore up a carjacker and gets that out and start putting some fear of ownership into the people who are supposed to be taking care of this stuff. Nothing's going to change. And the Saints organization is going to be more and more screwed the longer this goes on. I've long wanted Mickey Loomis to go. Even I I didn't change my opinion. I just hit pause once and we're going to go into this a little more detail. Once it looks like finally maybe some changes are happening in this 2024 offseason. Let's see how it goes. Came out swimmingly in the first 2 weeks. Still wasn't a Loomis fan, but I'm going, okay, maybe this will work. If he can get it turned around, if he's recognizing some of the stuff that I'm about ready to talk about, okay, deserves to stay and see how it's going to play out. That shit ain't happening. What Mickey Loomis cannot do, it's one phrase, 3 words that he can't say. I was wrong. And you run into a lot of people nowadays with the inability to admit they're wrong. Doing what I'm choosing to do here, that's not a phrase I'm going to be able to use because God knows I'm going to be wrong, and I'm putting it out there in front of everybody. That easily can, and it's happened. Banged on me in the comments, going, "Hey, you're wrong on that." Yeah, it kind of was. But what makes it worse with him is he kind of acts the arrogant ass when he gets on the radio or in front of a camera and tries to tell us we're wrong, not him. That we can't believe our lying eyes that he knows better than we do. He might, but maybe he's so busy looking beyond the results, he hasn't noticed the results are pretty crappy. And what I've really kind of moved from the original last couple of years, Mickey's got to go thought process is really evolved into more of a, I think Mickey has to go. And the reason why he can't admit he's wrong is I'm pretty sure, almost completely positive, he's just living in past history and on past successes. And I don't really know how much he had to do with the actual successes of like the 3-year run from '09 to 2011 or the last golden age we had from 2017 to 2020. And I'd like to point out that was a 3 and a 4-year span we're talking about. Kick in 2006. Pretty much 8 successful playoff type seasons we've had out of his 20 because 2024, he got the job in 2004. Kind of over 20 years, 2 decades. His record is 8-12 on playoff caliber teams, being the man. Below 500, mediocre. Does shit sound familiar? It's every time you turn around, it's staring you in the face. It really is about he's the wrong guy to do what needs to be done. And the real problem is over the last, because it's going to be 4 years in a row. I'm counting that as the 12th non-making it year. And 4 years in a row is by far the longest span over that 20-year stretch. Look, he's the guy in charge. He's the guy you got to hold accountable. And instead of doing anything to fix it over this span, he's doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on the same things that aren't working anymore. And the biggest thing I think he's done, and I said this last year, although I didn't have a channel, so you're just going to take my word for it. And Jason shows up Sunday night. We get on this conversation. He can attest to this. In fact, he's on board with me also. Is the game of footballs has always been an evolving, changing sport, especially at the NFL level. But it used to be at a much slower progress, like over a decade before something that was working began to shift to not working so much anymore. I think we've seen over these last few years that it's moving much faster. Both sides of the ball are evolving and figuring stuff out. And when that works and we can't stop it, well, we figure out a way to stop it on this side of the ball. So it's not working for them anymore. So therefore, we've had like 4 years of a chess match with a lot of different things going on that I don't think anybody in our organization realized it, or if they realized it, they just didn't have the balls or the brains or whatever it is to go in there and say, we've got to make changes. And the reason why I hit pause on Mickey Loomis, because one of the things definitely was the offense. And then we hit the reset button. We did some stuff that kind of pulled us out of the dark ages of offense into more of a modern era. But it wasn't soon enough. It should have been done way before 2024. And then I'm not even sure the commitment we actually had to it. But the real thing is, it was late. Other teams had already started picking up. And this is something that I saw on doing some research for something else, saw a YouTube video that caught my eye, that it led me into the black hole of kind of what's happened over the last 4 years as far as offense is concerned and how far we are behind the trend compared to some other teams. Basically, the premise, and you can Google this or search it on YouTube and find some videos and some a lot more detail than I'm going to go in. But a lot of their premises, this is no longer a pure downfield passing quarterback driven league, like a lot of talking heads in the media and especially around draft time are keep trying to convince people it is. That it is not the 2000 and teens. The holy grail is as hard now as it was to get to prior to 2010. And with the holy grail they're talking about is a 5,000-yard passing season. So started doing some research on this and finding out, so when you stop and think and you look at what's going on in the 80s and 90s, 70s and before, more or less 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and occasionally you'd have some type of passing offense coming out, and but between the number of games being played in a season at the time and the way the game was being played, nobody thought it could ever be done. And I was 13 years old when Dan Marino did it in 1984, and we were like, "Oh my God, that record's never going to be broken," and it held for the rest of the 80s, all the 90s, and most of the 2000s till Breeze finally hit it in 2008. That was the second one ever. 2010 to 2019, it happened 10 times. It basically averaged happened once a year, which is insane. And Breeze had 4 of them. Brady, Stafford, Peyton Manning, Ben Roethlisberger, Patrick Mahomes, and the last one to do it in 2019 was Jameis Winston. Read into that list of names what you will. In the 2020s, we've only had 3. Brady again, Herbert again, and Mahomes again. Or Herbert the first time, Brady, Mahomes, both again. Should be noted, all 3 of those were in a 17-game season. I do not know if any of the quarter or all of them needed all 17 games. Just fair point of reference. And the premise of a lot of this stuff was based on was the Tampa Bay Kansas City Super Bowl, when earlier that season, Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill lit up that Todd Bowles attacking style defense for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns in the first quarter. Fast forward from there to the end of the season in the Super Bowl, Todd Bowles rolled out a completely new defense that a lot of people took notice of, about we're just not letting them beat us over the top. We'll give up the short passes. We'll let them tinker around in the running game. We don't care, but they're not going to blow us up like that. They're going to have to drive the ball up and down the field, score points on us, and win the game to some success because Tampa Bay won the Super Bowl. And their premises from that point on, they started seeing more and more of that development. So you still had some of these 5,000 or near 5,000 yard seasons, but they really started delving into the numbers. Running attack was going up. Average depth of target was going down. Yards after catch was counting for a lot more yardage than the air yards of the ball being thrown, even with passing statistics being high. But all that stuff has been trending slowly down over the last 4 seasons. And teams have gotten smart about it. Offenses have changed. You've seen more development of some of the better offenses in the league when you're talking about Frisco or the Rams or Detroit with Ben Johnson, what the Ravens are doing, what the Bills were doing. And you did see a component of that deep ball, but it wasn't that constant push to push it deep like the Saints were doing through that whole span, which is one of the reasons why, along with some bad defenses, the Breeze was able to do it 4 times. You're getting better defenses everywhere, defensive scheme to stop. They just don't want to give up the explosive plays like they were used to. Does that sound familiar? Well, my point of contention is we waited forever, and we weren't the only one. There's some other teams out there that waited forever, and those are the organizations I think you're kind of looking around going, yeah, once proud organizations that were on the way down. Patriots come to mind because they stuck with old Bill forever while this was evolving, and they weren't keeping up. But there's others. I don't think our defense is caught on either. Because while we were doing this reset, we all assumed I was one of them. And I thought we were going to be bringing an elite defense. I was going to make this season. So here you go. Mickey, this is what you have to do. I was wrong because we don't. And we still have some good players there. And if you look around the league, there's a lot of teams with some really good players, some teams relying on aging players, some teams relying on young players like us. And they're doing okay. We just played a couple with Denver and San Diego, and you saw how good their defenses are, and that's 2 top 10 NFL defenses, what we thought we were going to have. And I think it's what it really boils down to is our defensive coaching scheme and personnel are stuck just like in the past, just like up until last year, what we were trying to do on offense with Pete Carmichael was stuck in the past. And I think it's because our GM is stuck in the past. You have too many people in this organization that are not looking around the league and realizing they're still thinking, it takes 5 years to a decade for the way the game is played to no. They're doing it at a much faster pace. Somebody in the comments when I did the Dennis Allen video went, we need to be looking into a younger, more modern football GM, and I 100% agree with that. And I didn't think I would, but that kind of helped me get along this line going, you might have to do that. You would need somebody. I would prefer some with a lot more experience, but the flexibility to realize, dare I say it, maybe Sean Payton and Vance Joseph in Denver are doing it right now. Because there's, on a coaching level, never in my mind what I thought Sean Payton changed his playbook and his play style to a comment. Oh, he did. He's done it. With a lot less talent around on that offensive side than he's used to having. We'll see how that pans out. But especially when we played Denver, because I hadn't seen a lot of it, was amazed how much Vance Joseph, who's one of the best defense coordinators, was doing a lot of different schemes. We know San Diego does it with their guy whose name escapes me right now, Mittner, I believe, and how much they can change and react to what you're trying to do and then come up with a plan to stop it, and using, in both cases, multiple personnel when they need to be able to do it. I think we're still stuck in the 20 teens. I was getting driven nuts. And speaking after the Philly game, Dennis Allen and Honey Badger both said it post game after we lost that one. Well, we're a man team. And it was point of reference a couple other times in some of the losses. I don't hear that anymore. People are pointing out, hey, we're playing more zone and more quarters and, um, you know, that show rush, drop out, getting in the zone or a zone blitz. I think I've seen a little bit of meddling with that, but we don't look good doing it. It's creating a lot of confusion, mostly because I think we're trying to figure it out as we go almost. I don't know. But that's what I wouldn't say every team in the NFL, a lot of NFL teams are doing defensively. That once again, second year in a row, we have let the game evolve and other teams outpace what we need to do to be able to compete right now. And it's not so much about being a copycat league, although that is part of it. And a lot of that goes on when something's working. But in the case of Todd Bowles, a lot of teams started copying it, but then they started evolving it. And I think that's the key. Same thing on the offensive side. And I think that's the thinking now. It's going, you've got to keep the changes going because there's always somebody working and figuring out ways to beat it. And so you have to be ready for it. Not at the end of the season, not during the off season, during the season, during the games. This is all about the leadership up top and how all this plays out. I'm sorry, it just doesn't get away from that because if the guy running the show, who's Mickey Loomis, is hey, I'm trying to recreate 2009 because that's when we won a Super Bowl. My response is good luck. You can recreate 2009 and play that type of or what you're trying to do, what we did there, what the rest of the league was doing there, and try to recreate it in 2024. You're going to get your ass kicked. You're not going to have the personnel available to run it correctly. What you're trying to do is stuff that has been going on for the last decade and a half that most other offenses have already figured out how they're going to beat it. So as soon as you do it, they're getting happy, going, "Jesus, this is easy." As opposed to, well, I got a game plan for Vance Joseph or Mentner's defense or Spags' defense in Kansas City. Going, there's another one. Spags was a tried and true 4-3 guy just straight out of the Tom Coughlin era of the Giants, and he tried it here in New Orleans to disaster effects, which taught him a lesson. He's went to Kansas City. Uh, That defense he's running now looks nothing like when he was Giants DC and our DC. Where he needed the right players to run it, nah, I ain't run anything. Just give me players. We'll figure it out. But the guy running the show, Mickey Loomis, no, 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 no. The Saints way. We roll it back. We want to keep the continuity. We want to keep the culture. Blah, 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 blah. This goes back. And we talked about this earlier in the offseason, even before OTAs. The mistake was made not recognizing what was going on in your own roster and around the rest of the league. I'll give you a pass on 2021, but by 2022, when Sean left, and I have nothing to base this on other than wild speculation, but I think one of the reasons why Sean wanted to get out of here because he knew what was coming and he knew his GM was going to fight him every step of the way to do what needed to be done. And therefore, let's promote Dennis Allen to head coach. So we want to keep the continuity. We want to keep the culture. We want to keep it rolling, just roll it back and keep doing what we're doing. Or maybe Mika just says, well, I want somebody who's going to be a yes man and just listen to what I tell them. I'm the genius running the show. I'm the reason why we won as much as we won. I'm never wrong. Look, it's bullshit. And right now, the Saints organization is paying the price for it. Really and truly, what we were, or I was talking about in the last segment, should be mentioned. I think if you're running again an organization, you're the GM, you're the president, you're the whatever title the guy running the organization goes under, you're the one that's supposed to be thinking strategically. What's the strategy, right? The overall. We have an objective. How we're going to get there. What do we need? We need to start putting people in place. Is then you start thinking, well, how are we going to accomplish? Our objective is to win the Super Bowl. Well, what's the strategy we're going to employ? Well, we have to modernize our offense and defense to what the NFL is doing so we're able to stop it, while thinking we're going to have to come up with ways to beat it and make it better because other people are also coming up with ways to stop it. Well, then once we establish all that, how are we going to do it? What's the X's and O's? What's the tactics week in, week out? And that organization thinking, you know, comes from the top down and the vision of the guy on top. I just don't think you can get around it. I don't think you can start in the middle of the bottom and work back up and ever have it work in anything in life. And what you have, like we mentioned earlier, is a guy looking back in the past at what used to work, and I want to recreate it. And that's nothing that hasn't happened before in the NFL, even possibly recently. Mentioned the Patriots. They're finally getting on board. I don't know how it's going to work out. Seattle, kind of getting stuck in the same grind with Pete Carroll. Went, okay, let's make some changes. You can go down the list, and you're seeing some of these teams that were once proud organizations that were teetering like we were righting the ship. It's not happening under Mickey. And so we'll get into the nuts and bolts. And I think this is going to be very short because I don't think anybody, you know, this is almost the givens because we know his roster management been horrible crap. Just a direct offshoot of the salary cap being totally screwed. And they go hand in hand. Too many bad contracts given to players who were never going to live up in production to what you were paying them. And then as you got more and more, mostly because of the pandemic in 2020 and Drew Brees retiring at the same time, taking that massive drop in the cap plus Drew's dead money at his retirement and having to scramble to get out of it. And instead of taking your medicine, no, we're going to roll it back. We're going to keep the culture. We're going to keep doing what we're doing. We're going to try to rebuild that 2017 to 2020 success. You're missing a few key people that were involved in that ain't here anymore. You just made the cap situation worse. And every time you did the cap gymnastics to get out of it, you just, in the long term, made it worse to the point where you are now. And this is where my aggravation and pistivity is hitting a high new level. We should be sellers going into the trade deadline, and we can't do it. We could do it with a few players on our roster that I don't think is going to make a difference gaining anything from it from trading him. And this has more to do with the contract situation. You know, the night I was over at brother-in-law's house, the sports accountant and I got together and we're just looking at a lot of possibilities and trying to find them. There's a few. We'll talk about them in a second. But you got such a mess there. You can't pull what Washington did last year. Because let's go ahead and talk about one guy. You may have that's tradable. It's not going to dead money kill you or cause any more cap issues. That you probably have some real ability to get. Now, I don't think you ever get a first rounder for him, but you could get some draft capital as Chase Young. Yeah, you see, that's the guy you're talking about. Hey, we need to keep him in the building. And right now, going a lot like Washington last year. As much as we'd love to keep you in the building, we can get some value for trading you because we've got a lot of rebuilding to do. We've got a lot of cap to shed, dead money to shed. And where you're sitting right now, I expect a lot of thumbs up from what I've already tell you, because bang the thumbs up if you think this is a 100% true statement, because I sure as hell do. That the quality of personnel players you have, and especially depth, And in some cases, some young players who should be developing, and for whatever reason, you're not. But from top to bottom is a 53-man roster. You barely resemble what an NFL team should look like in a 53-man roster. An actual NFL team with some real chance to win anything. And I think I'm being generous. I'm open to the fact that somebody in the comments is going to come back at me and go, it ain't even close. And you know what? I probably couldn't argue it. But the last hope of optimism that I have that there is enough there to salvage player wise, especially age and non-shitty contracts that you can get rid of the rest of them and then rebuild again like Washington. And they started it right at the trade deadline as sellers. But we can't do it because Mickey has got that all junked up. Which would be fine if he could draft first rounders. Now, look, 2017 draft was massive. He still wants everybody still wants to talk about that. It was a great one. And it helped put the finishing touches on what they were kind of starting in 2016. Caught fire in 2017, and we had the last great run of, ended in 2020 of teams that truly were good 53-man rosters with playoff calibers. And 18 and 19, I think both those teams had a real shot. Well, 18 should have made the Super Bowl, but I think both of them should have had a real shot if we wouldn't have kind of screwed it up or the referees hadn't screwed it up. But you took your shot and the window's closed. And it's been closed. Nailed shut. Steel hurricane shutters on it, padlocked 15 times. You cannot get through that window. So you got to find a new one. But we're still trying to punch our hole through that old window. And then when you look at the first rounders, look, people can talk about Jeff Ireland and the scouting, blah, blah. Ultimately, all this falls under Mickey's domain. He is the guy in charge. And the cracks have been showing all over the place. So he's the guy that ultimately okayed, again, some good first round picks. Ramczyk, Lattimore. You go look at the list. He's the guy that signed up on Davenport, Penning, Anthony, Ellis, Robinson. There's some real never should have been first round pick type project guys that were taken in the first round. And when they didn't work out for one reason or another, they're killing you. Really, the only one on the list that has a shot is Penning, who, in all fairness, has been serviceable so far this year in 8 games. But in year 3, a first round pick being serviceable meant he was a project and you took him too high. And then you can't admit you made a mistake. Letting Trey Hendrickson leave and keeping Marcus Davenport. Do I even need to go into this again? Or can we just all agree how paramountly stupid that was? That's on the head of Mickey. And then those are the kind of mistakes that really set you back. Because Hendrickson makes up for the first round dud you've got in Davenport. And ultimately, both of them leave. Davenport still gets hurt every year for every team that tries to give him a chance. Meanwhile, the pace is going. Trey Hendrickson may end up one day being a Hall of Fame edge rusher for Cincinnati. Yes, I said it. And that will be the final. As much as I've pissed off that Trey Hendrickson is no longer on this team when he should be, and he should have been retiring to saying, if that ever happens, yeah, I'm going to totally lose my crap. And so this hard roster management, both in talent or lack thereof, cap situation, the way everything involved, we're just stuck. We're just stuck minimizing at the trade deadline. Maybe we can move Young, maybe one or two other guys, but for the most part, it's almost like, is it even worth it? Even at the point of you could cut players and shed some salary, you really can't because there's just too hard to find a player that make a difference that just doesn't have so much dead money associated to his name. You're actually in the hole. You actually run the risk of going over the cap by cutting the guy. Seriously. See, right now under Mickey, we're stuck in neutral. And again, I think I'm being overly optimistic. I think we're stuck in reverse, actually, would be more accurate. But if you want to look on that, we're stuck in neutral. We ain't going forward. Not enough to make a difference. Not right now. And this is all the cumulative effect of look, really, this was starting 2019, 2020. It was already getting out of hand, but we were still grasping that window that was closing, trying to dive through it. And we didn't make it. But we didn't do the stuff we needed to do right then. And then doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on everything. And to the point now, this is ultimately where we're at. You have three guys that possibly even four. Well, definitely five because one of them's Ryan Ramczyk, and I definitely think this is going to happen. But when you start looking at DeMario, Honey Badger, Cam, and Taysom are all getting to the point in their careers, age-wise, production-wise, a couple of these guys are having just constant injury issues, if not all of them. They could decide at the end of the season they're all going to retire. And boy, are we effed if that happens with the dead money associated on those names. So much like we had to do with Ramczyk, you may have to rework some deals and tell them, look, you're going to pull a muscle in OTA so we can put you on the pup and we can IR you and keep you on the books while the other two retire. And then y'all can retire the following year. And that still doesn't solve all our other cap problems. That actually it's more of a hindrance. And it's all dead money. It's all cash already paid years ago that we keep stringing out so we can keep the cap number in compliance. And it's all going to come home to roost. And it's going to come home soon. And when that happens, there's going to be no signing free agents. There's going to be no extensions. Guys are going to hit free agencies you would like to keep. You're not going to, you see that a lot with these teams that are get up against it, and you got to let them walk. Which really brings us right back circular to roster management. We've been letting talented guys walk out of here, beyond Trey Hendrickson. We got problems on our defensive line. If we still had a Malcolm Roach or even a David Onyemata right now, a few of these other guys that are bouncing around the league, they were better here a lot of times than the guys we've brought in to replace them. And those guys are on the list of, for the most part, between a combination of dead money already paid or guaranteed money, we'd still owe them. They're stuck on your roster for at least through this year, and some of them possibly even next year. So even if Mickey at this point goes, man, I was wrong and we got to hit the reset button, not really sure how capable, you got to do some deep dive math, but not really sure how capable him finally coming to terms with the error of his ways 4 or 5 years late and still being too screwed to do anything about it for the next year or two. Mickey has to go. So look, it is just it the big takeaway from all this is the top cannot turn this ship around. Whether you're top of the organization in the front office or the top guy on the field running the team, the strategy and the tactics just don't mesh. And the guy down here on the field ain't going anywhere till the guy up there decides he's going to do it. And I'm not pointing to heaven. I mean, Mickey and his ivory tower up there. And realistically, this is the thing I alluded to. This should have happened in the bye week. The handwriting was on the wall, and everybody knew what was coming. There was really no point in denying that this could be fixed this fast. But you could have got a head start on it. And in effect, I don't remember when they fired Ron Rivera. Speaking of an organization that was kind of stuck in the past, there was a retread hire of the 2000 teens, helped destroy that franchise or whatever they were trying to do. But That's the boat you're in right now, and you can't do it. So I personally would like to see a GM come in for the remainder of the year, but I just don't think it's going to happen now. But damn, after Denver in the mini bye week would have been the right time to do it. Where the plan is with Guy Hartley, figure it out. And the first plan you got to figure out is if any of those guys retire that we were talking about earlier, or really anybody else on the roster with that much money tied up into them, how we're going to handle it. And then from those guys, if we need to move on from, say, a Cam, can we do it? What's the plan? How are we going to clear the cap? Scouting, analytics, all those guys, film, everything. They have to be on board figuring out, oh, every draft pick's important. And I may not need him to develop in year one, but I'm probably going to need him to play a lot in year one when we draft while you're doing this because we need him on the cheap, cheap. So if you can find one I can develop while I'm playing him, great. And then the fan base has to stick with you, or you got to try to sell this to them. And here's the real kicker about keeping Mickey around. Mickey could not sell a snowsuit to a naked man in the middle of Antarctica right now. Nobody's buying into his crap. And I'm pretty sure there's a large part of the organization working under him and for him that are in the same boat as we are going, enough's enough. I'd like to think we have some good people there that if they were allowed to do their jobs correctly, may be able to help in this whole situation. Because if we don't, then my God, it's just looking even worse than we think it is. So doom and gloom. Feeling a little under the weather today, so I really couldn't rant and rave like I wanted to, but I really wanted to rant and rave on this one because it's driving me apeshit. The fire Mickey thing should have happened probably right after year one of the Dennis Allen era when we realized this ain't going to work. And we had the chance to jump on the early side of all this, take our medicine, fix the cap before we started making more and more bad contracts. Find that offensive guy, like maybe a Bobby Slowick. I mean, there's a world we live in where somebody might have figured out, hey, go hire San Francisco's defensive coordinator. Let him bring the passing quarterbacks coach, passing game coordinator with him. A year earlier, those two guys might be here in New Orleans instead of Houston. Now, I don't know how everything else turns out outside of that, but I think the resetting of the mindset would have been there. But we didn't reset shit because we had to roll it back, keep the continuity, keep the culture, and bring in Dennis Allen. And it's all on Mickey. Somebody somewhere with the ability to fire him. And I guess it's only Miss Gale. And if he truly is the team owner, then just strip him of the power of decision making, give it to somebody else, and give them the mandate. We need to fix this. And we've got to start as soon as possible. Fortunately, it won't be at the trade deadline because we can't sell very much. Really, again, enough to make a difference. But as soon as the season's over, they got to get ready for what's coming. And what's coming is more heads are going to have to wind up on the chopping block. If you're new here, please go ahead, hit the like, share, subscribe, notification. We will be, at least I will be, and I think Jason will be with us also. It's probably about a 50-50, but Sunday night, normal time, for the post-game show. So go ahead and make sure while you're like, sharing, and subscribing, you hit notification so you'll get, when I put all those up of when it's going to be, you'll be able to watch it. Give me the feedback in the comments. Really enjoyed a lot of the stuff y'all had in the last couple of videos, so keep them coming. I'm scrambling to keep up with them the best I can, but I'm going to do the best I can to let you know what I think. So until I see you next time, I'm Tim. Peace out. Who dat?